Call to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So welcome to our January 3rd, 2023 Tiverton School Committee meeting. Has anyone signed up for open forum? Okay. I'm going to ask for motion to approve the consent agenda.
Dr. Larkin, I'd like to pull the minutes from December 13th from the consent agenda.
Okay. I'll ask for motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 4A, minutes of 12/13/22.
So moved.
Ask for a vote. Mr. Delegates?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mrs. Farnworth, item 4A?
On the minutes from December 13, under item 6A, where we had reviewed the minutes from November 29th, there is a motion to approve minutes once the areas have been addressed, made about no actions, no votes. There were also, I had pointed out the need for us to change the wording in the minutes from elected to appointed on the committee representation, as well as make note of the fact that there were no appointments to the finance subcommittee, and that was not reflected in the final minutes that came out on November 29th, and I'm thinking that this particular motion may have been a little misleading because it didn't include those two. Those were the two important pieces, right, if you
All right.
recall?
So in other words, the minutes are still inaccurate?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's one spelling error, Dr. Larkin, with your name on item 3.
Oh, good.
And then lastly, there were 4 policies approved on December 13th. 2 of them, there is no mention of the name of the policy, and I think that was something we had discussed during the meeting as well. Policy 1073 should be listed as the webpage policy, and policy 1075 as the electronic communications policy. Just, this is the memorialization of our
Right.
meeting.
Yep.
And then lastly, as I was researching this today, I noticed that all of those policies are still listed as second read on the school's website. So now that they've been approved, they don't need to be listed as such any longer. That was all I had.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Mendes just to make the corrections to the 13th minutes, and then the website's more an administrative issue. I
It
guess
is.
we'll ask our administrative people to make that correction on the website for the. Okay. All right. Thank you, Carolyn. All right. So we'll just leave that item in abeyance until we have the revised minutes submitted at our next meeting. All right, next is item 6A, discuss possible vote superintendent's contract. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the superintendent's contract, which essentially does not change from prior, except it grants Dr. Sanchioni a 2% raise and extends the term of the contract to June 30th, 2025. If someone would care to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Mr. Delegates?
Just wanted to say in public that appreciate the leadership from Dr. Sanchioni. Looking forward to keeping him around, even though it's only just 1 year past that, but doing a great job. Look forward to future years. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Mrs. Pavo?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Farnworth?
I'm ready to vote.
Mrs. Palish?
No.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a vote. Mrs. Palish?
I'm going to abstain only because I was sick on the night of the 13th when the considerable discussion took place. That's the
Okay.
only reason.
All right, Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So again, thank you, Peter, for all your work, and look forward to continuing that. Next is item 6B, discuss possible vote, new CTE, I always have a hard time saying that, programs. Mrs. Craven?
Happy New Year to you.
I'm very excited to stand here this evening to announce that we have received approval for 2 new CTE programs at Tiverton High School, bringing our total to 6 to date. I have Ms. Cusimano here to talk a little bit more about the programs. She is our CTE coordinator. I'm bringing it before you for a vote because it is in our program of studies and is listed as a pathway, and now that it's a full program, I need your approval as a program versus a pathway. So, Ms. Cusimano?
Good evening. So, as you know, we presently have 4 other CTE programs. We have Certified Nursing Assistants, which was approved last year. We also have a Computer Science program, which was approved last year. And then we also have our Engineering and our Carpentry, which we had from 2016, 2017. So this year we worked extremely hard. We had tremendous amount of input from the community and for our teachers. So our first program is going to be Public Safety and Law Enforcement. And that program has a partnership with the Tiverton Police Department, as well as with Attorney Jeff Soa and Christine Costa at the middle school with their mock trial teams. This particular program highlights having 2 New England Tech college courses that earn up to 8 college credits. So if a student takes 2 of those classes, which they do, and they earn a B or better, they will get 4 credits for each of those classes. Students will begin the pathway in 9th grade with civics. Then in 10th grade, they take a principal's class, which they can earn 4 credits at New England Tech. Then they take their 11th grade forensics upstairs in the science department. And then they complete the last year with a court issues program, which will get the additional 4 credits from New England Tech. They will also take a NOCTI exam for criminal justice. They will also take a National Incident Management System certification through FEMA and get that certification, as well as OSHA 10 and CPR and first aid. So it's quite an extensive program. We also have a partnership, as I said, with the Tiverton Police Department, in which we have an apprenticeship and an internship. So students will actually learn on job training with their police department. And then when they leave here, they can get some paid and unpaid internships and apprenticeships. That's the first program. Then the second program is a multimedia artist program. In that program, we
Ms. Cosmano,
have...
Can I just interrupt you for a second? I
Yes.
might think that it might be a good idea to take each of these in turn, since they are kind of separate. So first I'm going to ask for a motion to open up the discussion to approve the
Public safety.
Public Safety CTE program.
So moved.
Second.
So I'm going to open up the floor for questions from the committee first, just about that program, so that,
Sure.
kind of keeps the discussion organized. So, Mrs. Palish, questions?
No questions, but I applaud the ability to earn credits.
Thank you.
It's terrific.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Now that it's CTE, will it differ in any way from when it was a pathway with the requirements?
First of all, you will get some funding from the state, so we're eligible for Perkins and categorical funding, which will give us ability to fund some of the activities and actually to fund the credentials for the students to take. We also can welcome students from other districts who do not have those opportunities elsewhere. And as you know, Tiverton offers, we're a small school, about 500 students, but we offer a lot. So it's a great moment for the rest of the state to know what we're doing and get some more people out here.
Great.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mrs. Pavo?
I have no questions, but Ms. Cusimano, I want to thank you. You put so much work into these programs.
Oh.
And I want to thank you with all the programs getting better and better. And we're finally getting recognition that we deserve.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very, very
Well,
much.
thank you, but this is an easy district to work for. We've got great teachers, we've got great administrators. You all have been extremely supportive, so it's a sweet spot. We put it together, and They've got to recognize us. We're good. Thank you, though.
They don't always have to recognize us, but, Mr. Dakotas?
So I want to echo what Mrs. Pavo just said, nothing
Thank you.
different, but I do have a question. Do we have any idea how many students will be in that program or pre-interest in that program?
Well, what happens is as soon as you begin as a civic student, 9th grade, you're considered part of the pathway. What happens then when you get to the second program, then you're considered a concentrator, and those are the students we look at. So we pretty much have, I think I don't have my numbers in front of me. I have like 50 pages for each one of these applications, so I'm a little burnt, but we do have probably about 50, 60 students as concentrators, and then from there, they build, and then we have students who are also in the forensics program, so they're considered concentrators as well. So we probably have 66.
So that's a great number.
It's a great number.
Fantastic, right?
And I want to make a shout out to some of the people before I forget to recognize my colleagues. So Andy Gaychuk wanted to start this program. He's the forefront in making this come to fruition. He was the one that put forward all the work. I just wrote the applications and drove Ride crazy. We also have our forensics teacher, Dylan Sheridan, who is our football coach. He's also teaching forensics in our science department. And we have the police department that's been working with us as well. And then anybody who's teaching civics, those folks are people who are part of the pathway, which would be Lauren Teeter, Jen Landock. And if I'm forgetting anybody else, I don't want to go without that.
So kudos to everyone involved. So that's tremendous. That's a lot of students, so thank you.
Thank you.
And the grant writing is a lot of work, so thank you.
I'd rather teach chemistry any day.
Okay, Mr. Farley?
Yes, first I'd like to thank you for coming here and doing all this work, so thank you.
Anything for you kids.
So I just had 2 questions. So you mentioned Mrs. Costa, you would be working with Mrs. Costa on the pathway. Would you start in middle school and sort of start the foundations and then really properly start in the high school?
Great question. Half of the grant asks you about what's your relationship with the middle school. And I was just telling Ms. Farnsworth a few minutes ago how much I like teaching, and I'm not like giving you a line. The relationship in the I do this all the time. The vertical alignment between the middle school and the high school is extremely important, and we have that vertical alignment. Because of the mock trial team that's been so strong in the middle school, that's caused a lot of interest for students to come up this pathway. On top of it is when I began to ask for some information about the middle school, I called over, and it was Ms. Costa and all of the history teachers. I'm forgetting people's names at the middle school, so if anybody's watching, I'm sorry. And they began to tell me a lot of the things they were doing, so they basically have prepared our students to have a lot of foundational pieces. There was one experience, I'm not sure if you were part of that one, when they spoke with, I believe it's the Tinker case versus the Supreme Court and the actual Mary Tinker. You were part of it, and there's a lot of entrenching early about how strong our judicial system is, and that's very, very strong element we have at our middle school, and that has that essence there that carries deeply right up here to our high school. So it's vertical alignment is part of that actual grant. You will not get these programs unless there's a strong vertical alignment.
Okay, thank you. So my other question was, you mentioned sort of how we'll be able to bring in other students from the state. Do we have an idea of, is our legal program and is our, I suppose, preliminary art program, are they unique within the state, or especially within the East Bay area?
So the same time that I wrote these 2 60-page grants for these programs, the state, of course, wanted me to write an inventory of what you're doing and how many students and the funding and the breakdown of the credentials. And part of that inventory is to prove that your program is different than other programs. And RIDE is extremely, very, very adamant, making sure that when students come to one program or one district, there are differences. Ours stood out. That was one thing that we were told as we went through the process, that we offer so many things. I mean, just let alone, I mean, talking about the multimedia program, we're offering 8 college credits in a public safety program where students are going out for law enforcement and for law. We also offered this knock the exam, the FEMA certification, OSHA 10, CPR, first aid. I mean, we offer things that are just unique. And then we also have a partnership with the police department in which we have an apprenticeship and internship. That's unheard of. So I don't know if I'm going out of line, but I think we're going to be one of the leading ones in the state. That's just my feeling.
Me too.
Okay, thank you.
Nope.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And any questions from any members present or public from the internet? Okay. So, motion's been made and seconded, and I'll echo everybody else's accolades. Great job, and thank you so much for everything you do, not just in this, but in everything else, especially with a couple of different students I know. So,
Some of my favorites.
okay, so I'm going to ask for a vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
I, of course, vote yes, so motion passes. So now, if you'd like to go on to the Visual Communications Academy.
Sure. So this particular next program is called the Multimedia Artist Program. And this was Kevin Callisto and Adam Tracy wanted to use their artwork and their expertise, and they came together and said, we want to put together a program. So we have a 3-course sequence. The first one is introductory art. Then the students can go into a couple of options for their second choice. Art 2, which is an EEP class at Rhode Island College, or they can do graphic design, or they can do printmaking. And if you have a chance, I was just telling Ms. Farnsworth another night, you all have to come back early, and we have to give you a tour of what the CTE programs look like. And we'll talk about Z-Space in a minute, too. I got another idea. But, and then also after that, after the students finish the second course, they take AP Art, or they can take Advanced Art Studio. And those are the particular 3 courses. So the students in this particular pathway earn the credentials through a NOCTI exam. They can earn AP credits through the AP exam. They could also earn the EEP credits from Rhode Island College. At this particular point, I don't know the number we have, but we have 2 classes maxed out for the Art 2 class. So students are taking it as early as 9th grade, 10th grade actually. So students are getting college credits as early as sophomores. So we're offering students can leave our school here with at least a semester or more of college credits. Also, in this particular program, we also have partnerships with several different people. So we have it with Frog and Toad, Catapult, and the Gob Shop are our 3 industry partners. So we reach out. Adam and Kevin have a lot of relationships with a lot of local artists as well. So again, you got to come down and see the work that's going on down there.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
And I'll open the floor to questions. Mr. Dakotas?
Same as before. Thank you. My question is, how many?
I got to actually get my numbers back and get them back to you, but my numbers are quite big. For both our EEP classes, I think we have about 50 kids in there. I think our printmaking class and graphic design is probably about 60 in there. I think in total we have again, when you start the students as intro art, that counts as the first piece. But our concentrate is all, once you hit art 2, once you hit graphic design, once you hit printmaking, those are considered quite big. So we have probably about 200 kids in the program as you take them as you
That's
concentrate.
half the school.
Well, I'm going to say something. We've made changes to the schedule, and I know that we talk about great leadership. Dr. Sanchioni has a great leader. Ms. Craven is a great leader. Those visions, basically, we've changed the schedule so that students now have more opportunities to spend time in instructional time. And if you don't have instructional time, sitting in a study hall doesn't do anything. So when you start putting kids in programs, they start realizing what they can do.
Sure.
And that's why our numbers are bigger. And the kids are taking them. And when we start looking at schedules, it's going to get really exciting around here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Pavo?
I have nothing, thanks.
Mrs. Farnworth?
I had a question and it left me as I was interested in what you were just saying, but the graphic arts lab, I've seen it. It's phenomenal. It's very nice. The question I do have, though, and this is just for my learning, right? As you have a handful of classes tied to these CTEs, is there room to add additional classes to the same pathway to give students options within that pathway, or even to perhaps raise the standards for those pathways? I'm not sure.
Great
what's
question.
behind all of that?
Perfect example is the multimedia art. So when we wrote the program, they want us to write it for a 3-course sequence. So we wrote it in which there are 5 possible classes students can take. They have to start introductory art. Then you can go to art 2, or you can go to graphic design, or you can go to printmaking. Then your third level, you can go to AP Art or Advanced Studio, but you can take any of the other ones in the process. So their students will take up to 5 classes in the sequence.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
And echoing everyone's kudos, these new programs are something that we never had as kids available to us, and even 10 years ago didn't have for the students here. So it's an exciting time for sure, and thanks to you and to our administrators for, pushing these things along and encouraging the students to go for them. They're wonderful.
Okay, Mrs. Palish?
No questions, but a comment. I've known you for a long time. Your love of teaching and learning is infectious. Just listening to you talk, and the names that you're rattling off, those are also names that you hear over and over and over. And this love of just teaching the kids and engaging the kids, it's just infectious. And I know people that aren't here can't tell it, but that is what makes Tiverton so unique, is that desire to just engage them all wherever they are. And I just want to thank all of you again, because just listening to you, it makes me really, really proud that, you guys are just taking these guys to a level. These kids are getting opportunities, like Diane said, that my child didn't have. We certainly didn't have. So kudos to all of you.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have a great staff here, so thank you.
Mr. Farley?
No questions, just a very similar comment. Again, thank you for putting all the work in, and I know Mr. Tracy and Mr. Callisto have put a lot of work in, and it's good to see that it's finally paying off.
Well, thanks.
Okay. And any questions from anyone with us in the room or on the internet? Okay, so I'll just echo everybody else's comments. Thanks you so much, all of you guys, really. And this is, the stuff that we need to hear when we're going in, kind of also fighting the budget fights. So, so thank you again. So I'm going to ask for a vote. Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Motion
Thank you.
passes.
Thank you.
Passes. Speaking of the budget, next up is item 6C, discuss possible FY24 budget presentation. I should say possible vote. Dr. Sanchioni.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to bring a presentation. If you want to let the committee know that we'll give you a high overview this evening with the presentation. I know you have a copy of it too, that the budget books are still being prepared. You may recall when we did the structural deficit, there was a lot of great information there, historical data that really outlines the path the Tiverton Public Schools have taken for about 10 years, and we felt that was critical information to make sure people had. So we created a different type of budget book this year, and it's just still in production. So we'll get that to you as soon as possible. But the numbers for this year's proposal are all in this presentation here we'll share with you. So we start off every year, and we have our goals that we want to achieve with our budget. Can you bring that back for me? Thank you, Danny. And the goals will look familiar to you in the past years. So we want to, obviously, we have to meet our mandated fixed costs. We don't want to lose any staff positions. We've made cuts in the past. We'd like to add back some critically needed positions that were funded under ESSER 3. I believe you have a document with you this evening that shows you those positions that were funded there. We certainly, as a federal law, have to meet all the costs associated with special ed. We have to have calculated increases, operation, energy, and maintenance, and transportation. We want to maintain our capacity for technology and curriculum, and we want to educate the 1,800 students who come to us on a daily basis to the highest levels possible. And we feel like we can do that if we can maintain our current staffing levels. So those are the goals, and that's sort of outlined here. Some background information. This is our enrollment, and you can see here the red bar is our current enrollment. It's maintaining pretty steady. The prediction out there, you have when you receive the budget book, you'll see the source for that. It's NASDAQ and a company that did an analysis for us. And you can see that our enrollment's going to maintain pretty steady, pretty much hovering around that 1,800 level. We know that there are some potential developments in town that could raise those numbers rather quickly, but that's the information we have at this time. And so certainly the enrollment suggests to us, though, that there's really not a lot of room to cut any staff. Per pupil expenditure, we always try to give a sense of how Tiverton does with spending compared to other communities. This is FY21 data. We just submitted the FY22 data, so that will be available maybe at the end of this year. But so this is the most latest data we have. You can see that Tiverton's basically squarely in the middle. We spend about the same as Middletown, less than Newport, Narragansett, Little Compton, and a little bit more than some of the communities to the left side there, but certainly not overspending for for education by any sense of the means. And this chart here is talking about a 36, and I'll just use round numbers, $36 million budget, and this looks a lot better in your packet than it does on that screen, so I apologize that it's being transposed differently up there. But this shows you that the highest percentage of our budget is for staffing, almost 70%, and then the other categories are listed there. So the budget is really a no-frills budget, and if I train your eyes to that 70% budget, and then we split that out here, and again, I apologize, this is being transposed differently than it is in your packet. The largest category in our budget is for our teachers, and then you can see the next is our paraprofessionals, followed by custodians, administrative assistants, and then our administrators as a whole. So overall, again, the revenue we're seeking, we're a personnel-oriented operation. We want to maintain our personnel, and this money is being directly spent on services being provided directly to students. So a good place to start is where we currently are. Number probably looks very familiar to you. We're working on a again, I'll use round numbers, $35 million budget. That was composed of a local contribution of $26.6 million and state aid at $7.2 million. Last year, to make the budget work and not face any additional cuts, we didn't use Medicaid or fund balance, but you didn't allow us to use some entitlement grants and $1 million of ESSER 3 funds to fund positions. So that's your structural deficit right there. I mean, that either would have been cuts or, again, kudos to you, wisely, you allowed us to use funds that we have to maintain a lot of critically needed positions. And those positions, again, are in front of you in a document that you have there. So, again, we are operating with basically a 1.2, almost a $1.3 million structural deficit. So as we go into FY24, we start with the current appropriation, including state aids, that $33.8 million. We're going to recommend to you that we ask for a 4% increase from the town, which is a little over $1 million. We're going to put state aid as flat right now because we have no indication of where that's going to be. And so we're looking to raise our budget by $1,065,399. So the request from the town would be $34,936,411. Again, that is a 4% increase on their side of the dollar, and keeping state aid as flat. Now, I'm going to call your attention back to the $36 million budget. That is the budget that was in the pie charts. That's the budget that allows us to keep level staff, level services. So not cutting any positions, but not adding any new programs. It's basically taking what we're doing this year and moving it forward by 1 year. And again, it's represented, the number is by that structural deficit that we face on an annual basis. So to balance, and when I say to balance, I mean to get to a level service budget. Again, it's $36 million. If the town appropriates 4% at the $27 million, 27.7. State aid remains flat. Again, we've got that deficit at 1.2 million, almost 1.3. And then the good news is you have at your discretion this year two fund sources that you could tap into. Our current fund balance is a little over $1 million, and our Medicaid is a little over $500,000. So it's early in the game. I'm certainly not seeking for you to make any decisions on using funds, but making you aware that anything less than the $36 million budget means we have to go back and make some drastic cuts. Our budget is always broken down into two main categories, as you saw in the chart. 70% of our budget is staffing. That's exactly where it should be. Again, I don't know why this transposes when we go onto these presentations, but hopefully it looks neat in your packet. Currently, we spend almost $24 million on staff. You can see the major drivers for staffing. It's steps, it's lane changes, revenue for non-contract employees who do not have are not part of a union, and there you have the positions funded by ESSER 3 and benefits increase there. So our salary budget is our requested salary budget is $25.6 million, or an increase of $1.6 million. So that's the biggest portion of our budget. That's 70% of it right there, and we want to maintain our staff. That is absolutely our critically #1 goal.
Okay. Is that it?
No, that's not it. We're,
Okay.
Danny, can you move it ahead? 1, 2, right there.
Pause was
So
deceiving.
if staff is 70%, our expense budget is excuse me, staff is 70%, our expense budget is 30% of our request. Again, where we're starting is at 9.8 million. We're requesting 10.6, and I'll show you what that increase is all about, $741,638, 7.51% increase. And this is basically driven by contracts. So you can see here, transportation has an increase of 44,000, regular transportation, statewide transportation is for our special needs students. Regular transportation has an increase of 156,000. Energy calculated increase in fuel, electricity, coming in at 57,000, and our technology budget is going up 171,000. That's the increase on the expense side. We didn't increase any budgets for curriculum. We didn't increase any budgets for professional development. Nothing else for our staff, for our teachers. Really holding the line on things that are mandatory and fixed for us. And so here's your summary, and I think always this is an important slide. So personnel and benefits are 70.69%, and we all agree that that's a positions that can no longer be cut. Energy can't be cut, it's at 3.42%. Special education, federally mandated, 12.94%, that can't be cut. Transportation at 7.48%, that can't be cut. Technology at 1.60%, that can't be cut. That's 96.13% of our budget. That leaves 3.87 left of all the other things we do. Now, what's in that? That's legal, that's rubbish, that's water, that's the small amounts we may spend on PD or curriculum and things like that. All these accounts have been stripped down, as you know, over the last 3 or 4 years. They're at bare bones minimum. Again, I'm presenting to you a no-frills budget that is really maintained and based upon maintaining our staff that we currently have in place. So now I can pause. There's your high-level overview.
Okay. So by charter, we have to, just to clarify where we are in the business part of the meeting. So by charter, we have to have a voted number, preliminary number to the,
Not by January, it's March.
We do not need to have a preliminary number.
There's a new, when they made the change, and I sent this to, it's in your packet.
It's in your packet.
It's in your
Yeah.
packet. It's
So
March 3rd.
so we don't have to do that now?
Nope,
'Cause I
they
wasn't-
changed it.
I sent you an email to that effect last week.
March 19th.
March 19th.
Okay.
The only thing in January is we just need to have a joint meeting with the budget committee and the council, but we don't need to have a number now.
Okay. Okay, then I'll open up, yeah, yeah. So I'll open up the floor to questions or discussion
Just
on the
before you
part of the committee.
do
Yep.
that, Dr. Larkin, I'll just call all the members' attention. So you do have a packet in front of you, and the second page in that packet is something I referenced throughout the presentation, and that is the list of positions that have been cut and the positions that were funded this year, FY 22 through ESSER, FY 23, excuse me, through ESSER 3. So it gives you a sense of what, and when you look at that list there and you see important positions like math specialists and so forth, you know that they're critical. Again, what made our structural deficit and why we want to maintain those positions. So that list, I think, is important.
Okay, so I'll open up the floor to questions, comments from the committee. Mr. Dakotas?
Thank you. Peter, or even maybe I can ask Amy. I know we can't speculate, but if we had a crystal ball, would we say the odds are better that we'll get a little more state aid, a little less state aid? Instead of being boring and saying we're going to get exactly what we got last year.
So we, excuse me,
If you could turn the scales to 51% versus 49%, which way would you tilt that?
I would say 51, that we would get a little bit more.
Okay.
We would get a little bit more. I checked even as of right now, and they have, normally they issue preliminary state aid in November, and they haven't done anything. And I wanted to be conservative, but not grossly conservative, which is why I left state aid level. So, but I believe, word on the street, rumor mill, nothing official, that we may get more state aid. You
Okay.
know, more, is it $1 or is it,
Right.
$1 million?
Right.
I believe we will get some more.
Okay. Would it help at all if I reached out to our representatives? I know they're coming.
Yeah.
That would
leave
be,
to
that would be the
position of
time
the
to talk
committee.
to
They
them.
are going to be invited to your February 7th meeting.
Okay. So do we want to wait that long, or is that something I can make a phone call tomorrow and just poke around?
I would not be opposed to that. I
Okay.
mean, as much information as we have, when we can have it again. They also don't have a crystal ball, but,
Sure.
if they could, if they hypothetically said, we're thinking of a 3% increase or whatever it is.
Okay.
That's something that we could sort of build in as a contingency. Again, in the end, you don't know until the gavel hits and,
Sure, of course.
and things like that. But
Okay.
the word on the street is no one that I know of within the Riasbo circle has heard anything other than potentially some more.
Okay.
No one's gotten a concrete number.
So as the liaison, I'd be willing to make a phone call or two, just see, I mean, can't hurt, rather than wait another month, till they come. Dr. Sanchioni, the worst-case scenario, let's say that is flat, or it goes the other way, and so it's always good to talk worst-case scenario. If we don't get 4%, what would your initial thought be for how to trim that?
How to trim our budget?
Yeah.
Well, my first recommendation would be to use your fund balance in your Medicaid account to sustain as much as we can. And then we would get back to you on what that delta is and how that would impact. But I'll just remind the committee that, you heard me say this, that, going back the last 2 fiscal years, we really stripped our expense accounts. So we're in a position that we can't strip those much more. It just goes to personnel.
Right.
And then I'd say to you, look at this list here. 27 positions no longer exist in this district. It's going to be a tough situation.
And no matter what, we can't look to bring any of those positions back that were cut.
Well, we're asked,
Well-
in this budget, the $36 million is absorbing the positions that are currently funded by ESSER 3.
Right.
We don't want to lose those positions.
Correct. So that's what my point is. If we don't get what we're asking for from the town, some of those positions won't be able to be retained.
The town, or you use other funding sources to make
Okay.
up the difference.
But if we do, we're going to open up more structural deficit going forward.
Yep.
That's,
Yep.
okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Pavo?
I have nothing.
Mrs. Farnworth?
I will ask you, Dr. Sanchioni, what is your plan for us in our meetings coming up to go in depth into each of these line items?
Great, thank you for that question. So if you look ahead on your future meetings, on January 24th, you'll get a specific presentation on special education, transportation, and technology. And then on February 7th, as you know, the delegates are here. It's not listed, but the principals are prepared to come to speak to all the positions. So you're going to get individual reports on each school and all of our biggest drivers in our budget. And certainly the budget book is going to provide you a lot of information, and we'll continue to update these numbers as we get new information.
I think that I'm in agreement with Amy's
Crystal ball.
projection, if you will, crystal ball view, only in that, knowing that the state is in a surplus position. And, that makes it a little easier to have that prediction. I'm not sure about how much our reps are going to make any promises to us even when they come. I'll be perfectly honest. We've had them here several times in the past. But we can't count on anything until we get any kind of,
Correct.
And the legislature hasn't even begun their budget debates yet.
Correct.
And I don't even know, has the governor even proposed a budget yet? I don't think he has.
He
So, I
has.
mean, we're very much premature at this point. But because the town has changed the way that the budgets will be enacted, this allows us an additional timeline to really be thorough as a committee and do our jobs. And I expect us to do that this year with multiple meetings, going very much into depth. I think that we can't assume anything with regard to a 4% request. I'm not even sure I support a 4% request at this point. I need to understand really in depth how it is that we can support a 4% request as a body before we even take it to them. Because this is exactly where we're going now. We're not going to voters anymore. We're going to the town council. And we need to make sure that we are very well versed and understand every piece of this budget before we go. And that isn't, we have until March 19th to do that. Gives us some time, but it's not an abundance. So that is my first comments, that we do need to talk about this at every single meeting, go into depth. I know you have plans to make those presentations, be ready for the questions. I think there's going to be perhaps some give and take. And we all need to be prepared for that. And that's all I have for my comments right now.
Ms. Palish?
Just to echo Diane's comments a little bit, we may even want to consider just a one-off workshop where that's all we do, Saturday morning with coffee and donuts type of thing, because we do have a little bit of additional time, and I agree. I think we just really need to understand it rather than use the night meetings where we have business. Perhaps we might want to think about a workshop. I am encouraged that because of the new FTR change, we're actually not, the council doesn't have to have a budget until June 30th. So that gives us a little bit more time to find out exactly what, and them, what that aid will be. So we do have the benefit of time this year where we didn't before. One of the things at an upcoming meeting that I had talked about before, and I've given a little bit of it to Amy, is I pulled some UCOA data that shows some information on a sort of a per pupil by subject basis. It's kind of how we used to look at it maybe 5 years ago. And I would like to incorporate that in a future meeting. It doesn't have to be, if you've got, your kind of timeline set, that's fine. We can do it at a workshop or another meeting, but I would like to dig into that as well to kind of see, because what that sort of shows us is on a per pupil basis where we compare to the suburban ring. And then I pulled other districts that had similar student counts, because as the student counts get higher, I think they have efficiencies that we just can't have when you only have 1,800 kids. When you have 3,000 kids, there's efficiencies that, that come in with, you can, your per pupil, it seems counterintuitive, but it's not. Your per pupil actually drops because you can be more efficient because you have, more students per teacher, where, when you have 1,800 students, we have to be very efficient with what we have, because the lower the students, the more it drives up that cost. And there's things you just have to have. I mean, that's the reality. So I would like to dig into that UCOA data a little bit more. And I don't disagree that, to Diane's point, is we need to understand, everything before we go. Just one quick, I wanted to just, Peter, this staff reductions. So the FY21, the FY22, those are gone. We're not even attempting to bring those back. But we do have the FY23 reductions they weren't really reductions. We covered them by ESSER 3 and we were able to keep them, but we are now building those back in. Correct.
And some of those positions you will see on FY21 and FY22, they were cuts, they went away, and then we brought them back with ESSER 3, so.
Right.
Like the math
So this
specialist.
third column is, we are building these into this budget.
That's your
That's
structural
intentionally.
deficit. Yep.
Yes.
But that's a $36 million budget, not.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
36 million, yep. And yeah, that's all I have for now, other than I just want to make sure that we're all clear and our understanding is clear that we're not sending anything to the town administrator or the budget committee at this point, that we are waiting until March? Is that the intention of the committee? So we're not having a letter from Dr. Sanchioni, nothing's going
Unless
forward?
someone makes a motion to the contrary.
Effect that we're not, okay.
I don't think we can anyway. We don't have the word vote on our agenda.
I thought we did.
We don't.
We don't.
You do, but I don't know. You don't need to, though.
Oh, it says possible, but
Yeah.
the word vote was not added. All right.
That's it, thank you.
All right. Although to your point, I think you're right that you want to look at communities that have sort of a similar student count, but you also have to look at the demographic in other ways. So, median income and sort of rates of poverty and English language learners and those types of things also drive some of those numbers. Mr. Farley, any comments?
Just one question. So, when you say these positions that were covered by ESSER 3 would be built into the budget, do you mean that these would be covered by a 4% increase, or do you mean that these would be covered by a crystal ball state coming in and creating a $36 million budget?
I'm giving the committee an option to cover those using fund balance and Medicaid money they have at their disposal and/or increased state aid, or discussion of how we want to move the budget forward.
So they're part of the 36
Right,
to 16.
I understand that, but perhaps it's just me understanding your wording, but would those not then be structurally integrated because it's only a one-time funding? Medicaid is only a one-time funding?
That's been our budget the last 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, you still have a structural deficit.
Yeah, okay. Do we have a percentage of how many positions we could keep if we only got a 4% increase?
I wouldn't be positioned to keep.
Well-
It'd be how many positions you want to cut.
Right. Do we know at the
You
moment?
can
Or
take that list in front of you that's covered by ESSER 3 and add them.
I don't.
It's about 12.
A million?
And that's what you're cutting.
Yeah.
They may not be those exact positions.
Yeah.
But the number would be exact there. Yeah, it would be devastating.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from anyone present in the room or on the internet? They're smart enough not to show up or ask questions. All right. So if there's no other discussion, we'll move on to item 6D. Stage 2 submission review. Dr. Sanchioni?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, I've given you some information regarding this that happened, and we had a building committee meeting today. And I'd like to call your attention to the document that has a revised proposed project timeline. Today, this was reviewed at the Budget Committee, and this was, Building Committee, thank you. Budget Committee's on my mind. Approved by the committee for your understanding and your approval. And the proposed project timeline for the building committee, if I can just go through this with you. We currently have a project that's approved by RIDE that we're trying to seek funding sources for. That is the locker room bathroom project. Original estimate was $1.2 million. Our current architects have come in, spent a little more time, looked at the proposal, and thought that that estimate was very low. Certainly it's 2 years old, so we can certainly factor in supply chain and just the cost of doing business. But they also felt like it was formulated low to start with, so it's now at $1.9 million. We have a request at the town for $1.2 million. We heard today from members of the town council that they're going to look at that on January 19th, and hopefully that money would be allocated to the schools. There's also been a overture multiple times, and it was confirmed again today by the town administrator that the reimbursement amounts would come back to the schools. And in your packet on the second page, I've outlined that for you. That's $711,632. So that actually makes up the delta, the difference between the original proposal, so that you would have at your disposal enough money to complete this project. But what happens then is that we have our architects working really hard right now, and you saw their contract, excess of $200,000 to get the Stage 2 project done. But you're not going to have any revenue to do anything in Stage 2 for a while. And so the thought is, let's wait and submit it for September 15th of 2023. And that would give approval in December of 2023, which would allow you to then work on projects in the summer of 2024, when again, there may be casino revenue and/or other revenue available to you. So it just makes a lot of sense to delay that. We don't want to pay the architects now to cost estimate all these projects, which would probably be obsolete by the time you had revenue to do them. So the building committee is recommending that we pause the stage 2 and target that for September, and that's just to work on this locker room, bathroom project. They're going to come back to the building committee on the 24th with a revised cost estimate. They're going to take a closer look at it. They're going to do schematic design. They're going to bring that to the building committee. So there's two things for the school committee to consider this evening. First is the building committee has approved Brewster Thornton to continue to work on the locker room, bathroom project. That's been approved. And the second thing is to approve this revised timeline. So again, in your packet then is the reimbursement amounts on projects there, and then all the projects that are part of the 5-year plan. Projects on here would then get considered for the stage 2 submittal, but if you delay that out till September, it's just a wiser way to work, because they can get better cost estimates, and we're not paying them to do work now that you're really not gonna have funding to do any work on it until the summer of 2024. So I will pause there.
So we can discuss, but we're not posted to vote on anything. So I'll open the floor for discussion from members of the committee. Mrs. Palish?
So what, I'm just trying to do the two things. So what are we requesting from the council, the 1.2? That's the bathrooms and that's just to finish that?
Nope.
Okay.
The request you made from the town council was to fund the locker room bathroom project.
Right.
At 1.2 million.
Yep.
The new estimate has it at 1.9.
And we already, so is anything going before them in January?
So, yeah, so we voted to request approximately $2 million.
Yep,
It
no,
was
got that.
1.2 was the locker rooms, and the other was a lot of security things and some
Yep.
other things. But at any rate, we did vote that. That's going before them.
Okay,
But
so
it's-
it's that still, it's
Right.
just, it's short.
But in a sense now it's deficient
Gotcha.
because it
I
doesn't
gotcha.
have the other
But-
$700,000.
But the reimbursement can make up, even though we would
Could
have
make
liked
that
to
up.
have used that for something else,
Right.
it will at least allow this to make, okay. All right,
The-
I just wanted to be clear what,
That's another discussion they're going to have, is that will they, by statute, say that that money should be coming back to the schools for capital
okay.
improvements?
So that's the only
Or
thing
just
that
allocate
is
it.
going before them, and I did understand that we already voted on it, okay.
And they'll be aware that it's what we voted, but it's not enough.
And then, Peter, you're recommending, or Dr. Sanchioni, you're recommending that, so for stage 2, the building committee and you just, let's just hold off for now. Which is not going to, it's not going to hurt anything that they're discussing on January, because we're already in line for the 2 million. Okay.
You're just not gonna have any revenue to do any other projects.
Right.
So, why?
And then when we're ready, the town council will be ready for their next discussion of the casino
And-
money. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood the timeline and what was going before.
If I can just add a
when.
little more detail on the stage too. So what will happen is, on this list here of all the projects, the building committee is gonna rank order them, what they feel.
Oh,
should go.
perfect.
Then it's gonna come to you, and then, there has to be community input, a lot of steps, and certainly the town council is a big step that we're not gonna make sure happens. So by sending out to September, it gives us the opportunity to do this.
Well, and
very
it makes sure
efficiently.
that the new architects get up to speed, they're
Exactly.
comfortable with the numbers, it gives us plenty of time to get before the council, and they have, if they have questions, okay. I understand, I'm just trying to make sure I
Yep.
understand that.
No, I understand.
That's
Yeah,
it,
right.
thank you.
And then part of the meeting for the 12th, so we had talked about having not just the sort of required budget meeting, but also some discussion then about kind of where we are globally with capital, both in terms of schools and also where the town is hoping to do things. Not no final decisions, not even preliminary decisions, probably no decisions, but just sort of
discussion.
where are you guys, where are we, what do we think is reasonable? So that-
Real quick before you move from me, I want to thank you guys in the building committee. I mean, you doing some great work, and it's so important to have such a focused group on this. So I just want to give a shout out to those of you here that are on it, but also the people that are dedicating all that time, including members of the town council, to coming.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty solid group. Mrs. Farnworth is one of them. Contributes regularly, has lots of questions.
That's it. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Farnworth?
Did you call me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear you.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't know if you said Mr. Farley, getting all those Fs confused. Yeah, I know, you always get the last word. What's up with that?
He's not elected. Well, he's not elected by the citizens,
No.
so he's elected by
Anyway.
somebody.
So, question for you, Jerry. Has the town council agreed to have a discussion on January 12th about capital?
The president has, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a
I know they-
discussion, it's not, no money's changing hands.
Okay, so we will be posted for that night, for that discussion?
Correct.
Okay. And then from what we did hear this afternoon, that the casino allocation meeting will be
The 19th.
on the
yeah.
19th as opposed to the 17th, and I think that's something we would post for as well.
We have in the past, just in case we wind up having a quorum present, it's always safer to do that.
Okay. And then the concern I have, right, we did approve 1.2 million, and I guess
2 million total, but
2 million
1.2
total, and that was something that escaped me. But there were security items on that list and other items as well. And there was definitely, at tonight's building committee meeting, a collective gasp, if you will, when we heard about the increase from 1.2 to 1.9 for the high school. And I think we also need to recognize that perhaps understanding what that really will entail and be prepared for the fact that we may actually have to cut down the scope if it's that much more money, I mean, I can't predict what the council will do. They are in the driver's seat here. I don't know if they're going to want to, how much they're going to allocate to us, A, and B, where they're going to want to spend it. So I think the next building committee meeting, which is January 24th, will probably have a bit of that discussion to ensue. And I know that, then lastly, I do have a question. I know we signed a contract pending legal review with Brewster Thornton. Did we commit to funding for anything beyond?
That was part of the language that Mr. Scungio was going to
Okay.
make sure that we were not committed to saying we're gonna have, we are not committed to detailed architectural studies or schematics or drawings or anything like that for everything in the 5-year plan. It is it will be a pay-as-you-go process.
Okay.
But he has not yet returned the contract to us, so he's still working on that, I guess.
And Dr. Sanchioni, do you have a time estimate on when he'll be?
I don't. It's someone in Attorney Scungio's office who's more of an expert in that contract field, and the last time I spoke to him, he said she was working on it, but I'll get in touch with him tomorrow.
I would imagine the holidays probably delayed that some.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this is coming to me now because I was at the building committee meeting today. That group took a vote to have Brewster Thornton continue their work on the stage,
Just the locker room.
the locker room
Just the
work.
locker room.
Did they commit us to paying for that work? They don't have the power to do
Dr.
that.
Larkin's point, what you're committed to is, they're going to continue to work on it, so by sections of that, as they complete each section, you certainly would have to pay for that work. They're not
That's
gonna get
something
all
we
the
should have
way.
had as a vote tonight, I think.
Well,
They
yeah.
can't.
Yeah, well, the budget committee can't.
Right.
Yeah, only we.
Only we can authorize payment. So I think that's something we need to get on our next.
The building committee. I
Yeah,
got that in my head now.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure we get it straightened out quickly.
What I
And
think the
certainly,
budget.
we take their
But I think-
recommendations
Yes,
very
of
seriously,
course.
but we need to have the final.
Yes, of
approval.
course.
But I think they were, you can certainly correct this, but I think they were working in the scope that you've approved the contract.
Anyway.
And that's the
Anyway.
question, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I guess the way I would phrase, or the way I understand it, is they are working under a contract. We have voted that contract. The language of the contract still is being worked out by our attorney. And they have to proceed with the work in order for it to get anywhere.
Right.
Now, there's, I suppose, a theoretic possibility that we get nothing for funding the locker rooms. The temperature of the council has seemed to be that they are in favor of helping us fund that. But if nothing comes back to us under that contract that we approved, yes, we will have to pay for some work that they are doing on our behalf,
Well, yeah, they're not going to work for free,
right?
yeah.
I understand that. I do think we need to make sure that we have our Ts crossed, Is
That's what-
dotted at every step
And that's-
as we go forward, and that timing is important, and that, unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast, right? We have two elective bodies, we have one unelected body. Everybody's working toward a good common goal, but we have to make sure we follow these things in the steps that they need to be taken.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Mr. Farley?
Oh, I'm not last. I did have a question. So, regarding, well, actually, I'll begin by asking a different question. Are we able to make comments now on the order of the line items regarding the submittal? Submittal 2, I believe was stage 2. Yes, thank you.
I would suggest you hold that, 'cause
Probably
the
out of
building
the-
committee, no one's made those decisions yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
probably out of the scope of the discussion right now.
I see. Well, I'll move on to my next point. Regarding the locker rooms, do we have, assuming everything goes smoothly, we get funding, do we have a timeline as to when Rister and Thornton will finish designing and construction will be finished? Or is it, again, up in the air as you go?
The discussion we're having right now is they've been authorized to continue that process, so they're gonna continue the design, they'll work towards schematic design, they'll work toward bid documents. Our goal is to get, if we receive the correct funding, to go out to bid in the spring, begin work in the late spring and through the summer, and hopefully get the project completed as soon as possible. That would be the ideal.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
But to your point, in a way, so that was a discussion we asked them at the budget committee meeting. They'll have
The budget
some.
committee?
Building
or the
committee.
building committee meeting.
I know, we've all got that. See, you got us started there,
Contagious.
Jerry,
I
it's
just said that to-
contagious.
So at the building committee meeting, they were gonna have schematics, I believe, available on January 24th, and more detailed drawings and a harder number, somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks from now is the way I heard it from them. And I think that's what actually will wind up, when we're discussing this with the town council, they'll probably say, all right, we will set aside this amount of money, you need to come back with us with a harder number at some point in the near future before we make a final allocation, or they make a provisional allocation, something like that. Because it was a big change, I guess retrospectively, it always seemed a low number, given anybody who's ever walked into those locker rooms would sort of think you have to knock the whole place down and then put a stake through its heart, and then you can build something else. I don't know. They're in pretty bad shape, so.
Don't need to tell me.
And sadly, you will graduate this year.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Well,
too,
never having had to go
you
into them, I
you had
guess.
mentioned the stage 2, Sam, those building committee meetings are posted, correct?
Yeah.
And that recommendation is really going to come from them to us. I encourage you to attend those meetings, and from a student perspective, I
Yeah.
think that would be great for you to give your input.
That was a bit of a follow-up question as a point of interest. So,
Yeah, because
Do we
they're,
know when
they're
that
going to be
next meeting
going
is?
through that line by line, so attend those meetings and, you know, participate in the
Schedule.
discussion. Yeah,
It's
So the meeting-
scheduled
yeah.
January 24th at 5
Yeah.
PM.
okay.
and then I also wonder, Dr. Larkin, to Diane's point, if when we know we're going to have a building committee meeting, if just as you know, just to cover our bases on that agenda, when we know there's going to be a building committee meeting, say, you know, potential vote, discussion and vote regarding, you know, capital plan and building committee recommendations. That way it just covers us, so if we
Yeah.
ever need to, if we know they're meeting, that allows them to vote, and we are covered because we'll have it on our agenda and we can vote as well.
Yep.
We can just confirm their recommendation, or,
Yeah.
I can't see not, but
Yep. Okay. Mr. Farley, anything else?
No, that is all.
Okay. Mrs. Pavo? Mr. Dakotas?
How did we get $700,000 the wrong way?
Why was it 1.2, not 1.9?
Yeah, how is it so far off? I know it was 2 years ago, so I know that materials have gone up since COVID, but it seems like a lot to be off. That's like a,
Yeah, that was the reoccurring theme of the building committee today. And, you know, the answers were supply chain issues, the cost of doing business has risen over the last 18 months, and the original estimate was off.
So, Mike, the way I understood it was about 20% could probably be attributed to inflation, supply chain, sort of the usual suspects, I guess. It's a 58% increase, and I just think it was always lowballed. And but that's what drove some of the questions about, well, what exactly are we doing? You know, if we're building spas, that's probably not really in our best interest. It's about, and I had the number here, something 3,600 square feet. 6,500 square feet, came out to $287 per square foot. And what we had also asked them for was sort of comparable projects, some information. There was one in Westerly. I can't remember what they actually said about that, or just that they had one in Westerly?
They thought it was comparable and the price was close to their estimate. They
Okay.
used it to help justify their estimate.
Right. So there are comps, but, you know, knowing what that number is per square foot, I'm sort of hoping that some of our architectural expertise will help us, you know, not necessarily the consultants, but, you know, some of the other people who have architectural expertise can help us say, okay, well, is that a square footage number that seems to make sense for putting in a high school locker room?
okay, thank you.
But we don't have the line detail to sort of say, you know, why are you doing this?
Right.
Maybe that's not what we want
Okay. All right,
yet.
we have a new architect, so.
Yeah,
We
we'd
have a
rather
new
get it right,
architect,
huh,
yeah.
than have a change order that you can't afford.
Sure.
Like Newport, what are they, like $20 million over their thing that they're trying to figure out what to find $20 million? Makes our problem seems quite small. Anyone else? Anyone in the room or online? Okay. Then we are on something. Future meetings, we are meeting January 12th, and that should be posted as the budget workshop or budget meeting, whatever you call it.
That here, Jerry?
That's here, January 12th, 7 o'clock, and then it should also be posted as discussion of capital projects with Budget Committee, and that is the Budget Committee this time, and the Town Council, I think is the way I would list the agenda item.
So just capital projects, not FY '24 budget?
No, so the FY '24 budget is the joint meeting required by the charter, and then there's a second item, which is capital projects.
So you want both on the agenda, though?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
confirming.
And then we are meeting January 24th. I am not going to be able to attend that meeting, but you should have it anyway. And then the meeting after that is February 7th. Anything else in future meetings or agenda topics?
January 19th,
January 19th is the town council is
casino.
having a discussion. We should post for that present at the 7? Did they say what time it is? It's probably 7.
That's when they always have their meetings, so I assume
So
so.
town council at 7, but I would check with
They are
Joan.
consistent.
The actual, and that will be just capital projects, casino allocation should be the agenda item. And then February 7th, do we want to try and find a date to have a budget workshop on a Saturday? Or some other time?
So February 7th is our first meeting in February,
Yep.
so the 14th.
No, they moved it. It's first and third a few times this year.
Hmm?
I noticed on the schedule, we've got first and third several times this year.
Instead of the second and
Yeah.
fourth. Which is fine.
I don't
Yeah.
remember.
I
I
yeah,
honestly
which
do
is
not
fine.
remember.
I have it in automatically as the second, fourth Tuesday.
Oh.
I just need to know.
Yeah, the
Deb, you
7th.
weren't here last week, but I know before that we talked about not having it on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And then
That's- I
we-
just
Yeah,
needed to
Mike,
move
we
it.
had
Yeah, that's what
actually
it was.
approved that non-Valentine's Day thing back in
You
October.
did. It's
Yeah.
been changed.
So for the January 24th, the open forum for special ed, what kind of advertisement, I guess, is the word I'm looking for? What kind of, how have we been telling people that this is occurring?
We haven't yet. We waited till after we got back from the vacation. They'll start this week, and we'll use all channels.
Okay.
Website,
Okay.
social media,
Good,
principal updates.
perfect. And then what else is on the budget?
Budget,
And then, okay,
and then FY23 budget.
update. Yeah, do we want to try, thank you. Do we want to try to have a budget workshop, or do we want to just have the delegates on this, and then just that on the 7th?
Well, the only advantage I can see to setting the date now is that it gives us time to plan to be there. But maybe
True.
waiting till the 7th is okay too. Whatever is the committee's pleasure.
What other detail were you planning on having on the 7th, Peter?
That's not listed there, but I've invited the principals to be there on the 7th.
Okay, so maybe, then we'll have heard from all of your staff, so maybe after the 7th, we plan on a workshop, and we'll have our
Okay.
books by then.
Yes,
7.
absolutely.
And then
Okay,
maybe
10,
that
11.
workshop, Amy, is where we can go dig through the UCOA data, that
Do
sort
you
of
want
makes
to
sense.
tentatively set it for the 11th?
You wanna do that?
That'll be a Saturday. Why don't we set it for the 11th and then we'll discuss it under future
Yeah.
meetings, next 2 meetings.
Like at 9 AM or something?
Mm-hmm,
Okay, just tentative,
mm-hmm.
okay.
Anything else? Going to ask for motion to move into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42465A2, negotiation update, Council 94 in Newport Special Education.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
I vote yes. So we are in executive.
You gotta just-